NSFW, SX Ed teachers of Reddit. What is the most awkward cringe-worthy question you've had to answer in your class? I was one of the pupils. But this still sticks out in my mind. Not so much for being a funny question, but for the stupid answer. A boy asked what would happen if a woman put a tampon in the wrong way. So the string didn't come out. All we got was, well, it has to come out somehow. We were left in suspense as the teacher, a nurse, moved on to the next question. Was it some medical emergency or not? I guess the idea of telling 10-year-old boys about girls putting anything besides penises and tampons into vaginas deviated too far from what was appropriate. We weren't meant to know that fingers could go up there yet for any reason. Not a teacher, but heard two amazing questions. 5th grade SX Ed. Student. Why does my mom scream during SX? Teacher. She's having fun. 10th grade safe SX education. Female student. If you're having an LSX and the guy comes inside you and then you fart, does it blow bubbles? Teacher. Next question. I teach 5th grade. This is the time for the big talk in Indiana. I was roughly about 7 months pregnant. I was unmarried but engaged. My fiancé registered sign was a pretty active participant in my classroom, so all the kids knew him. He came on the field trip due to not having a male teacher available to go to supervise the boys. In Indiana, we still teach abstinence only. In the middle of the lesson, the instructor basically tells the kids that conception takes place after SX, which can only happen after marriage. 30 seconds later, eyes are on me, and a hand shoots up. One of my fabulous tiny humans blurts out, "That can't be true. MRS isn't married and she is pregnant right now. How did that happen then?" I'm pretty sure the instructor would have killed me in that moment had she been able to. This was my TED talk on how I ruined the abstinence education by being pregnant and unmarried. Edit. Thanks for my first gold and platinum. I have no idea what it means, but I'm glad that people enjoyed the hilarity that is my teacher life. A kid in my class asked what is the stuff that girls orgasm out if males is sperm. Teacher said that girls don't ejaculate. The kid responded, "No they do, I've seen it on the internet." OMG, I'll never forget a question a girl asked in my SX Ed class. Probably 7th grade. Girl. Does pee ever come out instead of semen when a man ejaculates? Teacher. No. When a man ejaculates it is only semen. Girl. Okay. But what if pee came out instead of semen? Teacher. That's not physically possible, as it's a separate system with urine versus semen. Girl. But what if it happened? Teacher. It can't happen. Girl. But what if it did? Not a teacher, but we had noticards and wrote questions anonymously. One asked, if both partners have long pubes, will they get tangled? How do you untangle them? And honestly, I never thought of that. The sound of opening Velcro. Once asked the question to a group of year 9 students. What do you do if you want to have SX and you can't find a condom? Student 1, male. Surely you can find something in your house. Maybe cling film? Student 2, female. Yeah. Or maybe tinfoil. I'm tinfoil. Like a little suit of armor. I'm a teacher in year 6, 10 plus 11 years olds, in the UK. It's the first year that children really learn and talk about SX in school. We had arrived at the actual sexual intercourse lesson where we focus on the science of conception. One boy out his hand up and said that there were, of course, sounding worldly wise, ways of having SX without getting pregnant. I nodded approvingly as I thought we were going to start talking about contraception. Yes, he says. You can stick your penis between a woman's breasts and then come on her chest. I suppose he isn't wrong. Hard to get pregnant like that. Took me by surprise though. I asked the teacher how the sperm got into a woman, and if she had to drink it from a cup to get pregnant. One of my favorite moments from my high school days. We had health as part of our PE class. They always got the PE teachers to teach it. And of course one week of it was sex ed. We had this dumb football coach who basically read us the textbook for a week rather than actually deal with the subject. Not really because of any squeamishness, but mostly because it wasn't related to football. And that's all he cared about. I didn't know it was possible to make sex boring until I sat through that week of school. All of us were dozing off or just daydreaming. But the last day, someone raised their hand and said, "Hey coach, how do you have sex? What's the process?" Obviously, they were messing with a guy. Close bracket. The coach said, well, okay. So you got a donut and a banana. And goes on to tell us about how that would work. It was so bizarre. Boy kid asked, what if it gets stuck? Well, one time my friend's mom had a friend who had braces and was giving her husband a blow. Ended up having to go to the hospital to get his foreskin unattached from her braces. Edit. For those asking. I can't remember if she actually went to the hotspot or not, but I know they called an ambulance. During our sex education in the early 90s, which amounted to 1 hour of dividing the boys and girls of each grade, taking them into their respective classrooms, and going over very broad topics, we were allowed to anonymously ask additional questions we had by writing them on a flashcard and passing them to the front. I asked what would happen if a boy peed inside a girl. I watched as my flashcard was silently read by the teacher, then unceremoniously thrown away without being answered. To this day, I still don't know. A nun taught us sex ed. One of the lads asks her if when you stick it in, do you just hold it there or do you wiggle it or what? Full stop. She turned red and informed him it was an inappropriate question. So what's the real answer? My daughter is a high school health teacher. When I told her there's a ridiculous question directed at her, she gave me these. 1. Why do I feel happy in my pants when I see a girl? 2. Is it true that a guy's balls will explode if he doesn't come? Most common question. Can you get pregnant from an LSX? Had a classmate ask if he could use a water balloon as a condom. The point of a water balloon is to break and spill its contents. That is the exact opposite of the point of a condom. Next question. Not a sex ed teacher, but a 7th grade classroom teacher. I had one boy ask me, "MR. XXXX. You know boobs, right?" as he cupped his hands in front of his chest. I nodded. "I'm sorry. I know this is a bad word," he said, "but I don't know any other way to say it. Are boobs full of cum?" Edit. Thank you for the awards. I don't deserve them. My ill-informed student does. That was hysterical. Not a teacher, but in grade 7 we had a box where you could anonymously submit questions. 1 or 2 would be read at the end of class each day. My teacher pulled a question that read, "What are anal beads?" The whole class burst out laugh, including our teacher, and he just kinda threw away the piece of paper and said that we all clearly knew what anal beads were, but just in case they are sex toys. We were very promptly dismissed after that. Somebody asked how he could get an orgasm. Simple. Go to the orgasm store. 1 orgasm please. That'll be $25. So I teach high school biology and there is the sex ed unit. The public school district I teach in a super conservative. So I did my lesson. No one asked questions. One boy came up to me and said he was uncut and he had some white stuff that smelled and what could he do to get rid of it. So I told him what it was, smegma, and he needed to ask his parents the procedure. I teach 11-13-year-olds. All subjects. I was explaining the functions of spontaneous erection to a group of 12-year-old boys. As you develop, and even into your adulthood, you will sometimes develop an erection at times that seem inappropriate. Just know that it's normal, and while it can be embarrassing, It does not necessarily mean that you are sexually attracted to anything or anyone at that time. Boy in the front row with his hand up. I have an erection right now. Is that normal? Edit. Thanks for my first gold anonymous redditor. I'm casual as all hell, so I have no idea what any of it means, but I appreciate the gesture. Like everyone else here commenting. Not a teacher but took sex ed once in middle school. A boy in our class during the Ask an Anonymous question part of the lecture asked what size dildo the teacher uses. She didn't read the question out loud, but scolded the class for asking inappropriate questions. I only knew what was on the card because the boy who wrote it told his friends and they were all dying of laughter about it. Also, the teacher's son was in our class and among that friend group. He wasn't laughing. Not a sex ed teacher. But when I was in health we had a younger and fairly attractive female teacher. One of the guys in my class thought it would be funny to ask her favorite flavor of condom. She just smiled and said strawberry. None of us expected it. I'm not sure if the guy creamed himself from the mental image or wanted to die from embarrassment. But it was a great class. We had a girl in our class ask our science teacher when did she lose her virginity. Not a teacher. But way back in grade 6 we had sex ed and the teacher had us write down questions on paper one day. She told us not to put our names because the next day we will be drawing the questions out of a hat to read aloud and then the teacher would answer them. So, the next day, and my turn comes up to draw a question. I pull the paper out of the hat and begin reading "Can women masturbate with a pillow between their legs?" Signed, a female classmate's name. Whoops. Shouldn't have read that part. We had a teacher do the same thing. The teacher read the questions. She goes, "What is a chilly willy?" She hems and haws. One kid raises his hand and goes, "It's when your GF chews on crushed ice then gives you a head." And that was my question, thanks. Questions from the sex ed class I attended in 7th grade. Why don't people only have sex to make a baby then? You know. Maybe they should. Close bracket. Why not wear 2 condoms? That isn't a bad thought. Common no. There was no. You shouldn't do that afterward. How big does a vagina get during birth? About 13 inches in circumference. The new incompetent science teacher, who was watching the principal teach the actual class, went wide-eyed at the tape measure wrapped around showing how big that was. And she took it next door. The teacher next door announced her pregnancy to students a couple months later. No doubt. Show teacher was like, "Your vagina's gonna get this big? Holy. Thanks. Southern US education system. Thanks. Oh. And the students definitely got a stern talk since some kids were caught joking about knowing what MRS. Nope. Has been doing every night after school. Edit. Show. When I was in 6th or 7th grade, the school messed up and didn't pull a kid out of class whose parents had requested. They accidentally exposed a bunch of his parents' lies. Among them being gay gives you AIDS. And masturbating causes cancer. His parents went nuts and pulled him out of public school after that. Not a teacher. But this happened years ago in my old elementary school and I heard about it. Teacher. Remember girls. It is always okay to say no to sex. Girl. Can I even say no to my daddy? He went to jail. Edit. If 2 gay guys are doing an L and the bottom farts, does that make the other guy's balls inflate? I teach college level anatomy and physiology. I had an older returning student ask where sperm is made in women. This woman had to be pushing 50 and she has 4 kids. She thought both men and women make sperm and that it intermingles to create an egg that then turns into an embryo. The awkward thing about this situation is that every other student in the room was looking at her and then at me. Her. Then me. I was looking at her then them. And back and forth. The other students wanted me to fix things and I didn't know what to say at first. My brain truly was yelling WTF. Does the vagina stay giant after a baby? Your quiz are now size. I am not a teacher. Back in grade school, One of my classmates asked the teacher during the sex education lessons about why his dad put fingers in his butthole. Then made him cry. But still loves him. The student disappeared the next day. I only realized it years later. I once asked a sex ed teacher, "Can you hold in a if you have an L?" Edit 1. This is what happened after and their response. The sex ed teacher was like, the anus is a muscle and is not designed for getting penetrated, so it can get loose. A community college health class on the inner city. A student raised his hand and asked, "Can a guy get toxic shock syndrome?" The teacher was perplexed until it was revealed that it was a common practice to plug up small bullet holes with tampons. Laney College, Oakland, California. I'm not a teacher, but one of my friends asked if it's okay that he masturbates 5-6 times a day. What a Chad. I am a peer educator on sex ed, and the most cringe-worthy of the question for me was, will I get pregnant if my BFP's inside my vagina? OFFS. One of the girls in my class, I wasn't the teacher OBV, thought that she would become pregnant if she shared the toilet with a boy. She was 15. Parents tell their kids stupid things to make them paranoid into abstinence. Not a teacher. But when I was in the 8th grade, this guy in my class asked if a male could get pregnant if he swallowed an egg. The teacher decided to let a student explain to him why he couldn't. That student was me. I remember back in the 80s I once had to spend several minutes explaining to a friend that AIDS was not created by an LSX. Somehow her mind had jumped from it being possibly transmitted that way to an LSX being what caused AIDS to spring into existence. So if I have to ejaculate, I just run to the bathroom. I love teaching sex ed. It is so awkward, but in an amazing way. Kids love when you are straight up with them, which I definitely am. I will answer any question they have. So I use a question box, so they can have anonymity in their questions. I have had some doozies over the years, which have led to some interesting Google searches in my phone regarding blue waffles and Eiffel Towers, and all kinds of fun stuff. But my favorite one, by far, was in a 9th grade class, and simply stated, Vagina. In my 8th grade health class, the female teacher, about 50 and very obese, was asked what does butt sex feel like. She described it as taking a very large, slightly uncomfortable dump. So now every time I have a dump that feel like that, I just think of butt sex. So I'm not a teacher, yes as usual, but I talked with my biology teacher and she talked about her sex education with her students. They were all like 11-12 years old. So in the FRSTSX lesson they were asked what they already know about sex and made a mind map on the board. They raised their hands and had to say anything related to sex, which was at the beginning normal stuff like condoms or pregnancy act. At one point one student said fisting and a girl asked what that is and he just straight said, "You take your whole fist and her really hard with it in the ass." Needless to say. Do you have twins if you put the penis in twice? Are there snack breaks during sex? Will I wake my parents when the hymen explodes? Does sex hurt more than a car accident? Or less? Just so I can prepare myself. Okay, but are there snack breaks during sex? This is important information. I am a biology teacher and we had some sex ed workers at school. One girl asked, about 13 or 14-year-old, "Is it normal that you bleed after you took the morning after pill?" Sex ed. Yes, it is possible. Long explanation why, girl. Yeah, because this is my 7th or 8th time and I bleed every time. Does it ever stop? Sex ed. Next topic. Some edits. This did not happen in the United States of America. So don't talk about RPA, CPS or other BS in my personal messages. Thank you. Morning after pill. US call it Plan B. I learned. Is easy to come by and very cheap. 10 to 15 euros. The morning after pill is not a tool of abortion but of contraception. I was not the teacher, but a classmate once asked if sex counted as a workout. The teacher, after a brief pause, said that technically yes, it could. The student then said, okay. So if I come in and my right arm is jacked, you know why? I mean, what do you even say to that? Not a teacher, but a girl in one of my sex ed classes asked how many calories semen has. About 4-25 calories in an average ejaculate. Edit. Fixed amount of calories. Edit 2. If you suck and swallowed. About 80 times. Not a teacher here, but an amusing one from when I was at school. The teacher, who was young, female, and generally drooled over by the boys, was demonstrating how to put on a condom, with a large plastic phallic object to demonstrate on. The class was pretty raucous, so she called out one of the more show-off boys to come to the front and demonstrate. She handed him the condom, in its wrapper, and put the phallus on the desk. She told him to put it on one-handed. He stupidly asked why only one hand. Completely straight-faced she said. Not a teacher, but I remember one boy asking why do girls don't like being up-head? Not a teacher, but I'm student. The person who came in said we could ask questions and this one girl in the back asked about sexually transmitted infections. And I can only hope she was just confused when she said, so what are the symptoms of getting a DUI? Question mark. The class just looked at her for a second and the lady responded by saying a DUI is a driving infraction. I heard a faint "oh" from her after that. Damn it. Why am I always late to these? It won't be seen but I'm going to share anyway. I used to be a social worker. One of my stints was a case manager at a residential program for teenagers. As part of that we got some grant money to teach a sex ed class. That fell to me and my coworker, the other social worker. I worked in the boys' residential. She and the girls. We held some of the classes co-ed, others separate. I'm just going to share my most favorite quotes from kids. Sadly, a couple of whom were having more sex than I was at the time. You can tell if a guy has herpes. His penis will be really, really white F16. If you don't pop your cherry before you're 18, it goes bad. Like, it will rot. F15. So, vagina is basically like an ecosystem. M14, and honestly, that was the smartest comment we had. He wasn't exactly far off. Not a teacher, but once during a sex ed portion of our teen health class, the teacher was very pregnant, and one student asked her, have you ever had sex? And he was serious. She stared at him for about 30 seconds until everyone started laughing at him and then she just continued to teach. No dumb question, but had a dumb answer to the sex ed teacher. She asked if we know where hair grows during puberty. There were the usual answers of face, genitals, etc. Then we ran out of answers. I thought back to an Eminem lyric saying palms are too hairy to hide and answered the palms of your hands. Most awkward stares ever from the class and a quick response of no from the teacher. I paused and thought, well, that makes sense since I've never seen anyone with hairy palms. Lesson learned. Think before speaking. Student. Also not a question, but a kid stood up and screamed that the kid sitting next to him was jerking off and watching furry PRN on his phone. The kid got expelled but people still talk about him. When I was in 8th grade sex ed class, our very buff female gym teacher was drawing boobs on the blackboard and showing us girls, the boys were in their own class down the hall, how to check for lumps. Combination of not eating breakfast and thinking about lumps in my boobs made me pass out. Literally. Faceplant on my desk. I woke up minutes later on the floor with our very buff female gym teacher straddling me and tapping my cheeks. There were a lot of jokes at my expense for at least 2 months. Straddling me and tapping my cheeks. I mean, I understand what you're saying. It's just the way you said it. Not a teacher, but in year 7 someone asked when the man comes, does it come out of the woman's mouth? Needless to say, that question was skipped. Not a teacher, But I remember that in my class, my friend asked something like, "Can the clitoris be attached to your forehead by a plastic surgery?" So not a question but related. Back when I was innocent, my tainted friend showed me a song called "Jizzed in My Pants" by The Lonely Island. So me not knowing just thought it was a catchy song. Well, one day in the middle of class a classmate was playing the piano and asked for a song request. Guess who asked to play "Jizzed in My Pants" and was immediately under fire from the teacher. When I was in 6th grade, the nurse taught sex ed and had us write out questions on index cards and pass them forward. Someone asked if turtles get boners. Never forgot that. I'm not a teacher, but for our sex ed the teacher had an anonymous question bin and the question was, how are girls supposed to masturbate? She then proceeded to explain that she was supposed to tell us about masturbation and then explained why it was healthy. Nothing more, didn't even answer the question. Not a sex ed teacher, but a middle school science teacher. In our heredity unit we talk about sperm cells and egg cells in the context of chromosomes from two individuals combining. Last year a girl asked, "Can girls get pregnant in their butt?" out loud. Not a teacher, but in the 10th grade we had health class and a sex ed portion. This one girl asked a question and asked if you could perform oral sex on a woman. And the teacher said yes and gave a vague explanation of how to do so. Middle school boys legit thinking and asking if girls have bigger butts because they have an LSX. As if that makes your butt grow. Edit. I can't believe I put an L when they use the phrase booty SX.